Hello, my good friends. How are you today? May God bless you all. I will not introduce anything. You guys watch the video and feel it, then let's evaluate together. The rain pounded New Orleans like a drumline gone wild, each drop slamming against the tall windows of Ethan Carver's mansion, with a rhythm that could wake the dead. Lightning cracked the sky open, spilling jagged flashes of white across the dark room where Nia Jackson stood, her breath hitching in her chest. She was barefoot, the cool hardwood floor grounding her as she let the silk robe slip off her shoulders. It pooled around her ankles like spilled ink, leaving her bare under the flickering glow. A woman carved from midnight, her brown skin shimmering like wet earth after a storm. Her long braids swung gently as she tilted her head, locking eyes with Ethan. He stood by the bed, all 6 feet of him radiating quiet power, his sharp blue eyes wide with something raw, hunger, maybe, or fear. The crisp white shirt he'd worn all day hung loose, the top buttons undone, showing a glimpse of the hard lines of his chest. His dark hair was damp from the rain he'd walked through to get home, sticking to his forehead in a way that made him look less like the untouchable billionaire everyone knew, and more like a man who'd just stumbled into something he couldn't control. "Ethan," Nia whispered, her voice cutting through the rumble of thunder outside. She took a step closer, her heart slamming against her ribs like it was trying to break free. "I'm not scared anymore." His breath caught, a sharp little sound that made her skin prickle. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched her, his hands flexing at his sides like he was fighting to keep them still. Nia closed the distance, the air between them thick with heat and unspoken things. She reached out, her fingers brushing the rough stubble along his jaw, and that was all it took. Ethan's restraint snapped like a frayed rope. He pulled her in, his hands sliding over her bare waist, warm and steady against her skin. Nia gasped as he pressed her against him, her curves molding to his frame like they'd been made for it. His lips found hers, not rough, not demanding, but slow and deep, like he was tasting something he'd been starving for. The storm outside roared louder, but all she could hear was the pounding of her own pulse. All she could feel was the way his breath shuddered against her mouth. His fingers traced the dip of her spine, sending sparks racing through her, and when he kissed her neck, soft, reverent, his teeth grazing just enough to make her shiver, she let out a sound she didn't even recognize. "Goddamn, Nia," he murmured against her skin, his voice rough as gravel. "You're gonna ruin me." She smiled, a small, shaky thing, and pulled him closer, her hands sliding into his hair. "Good," she whispered back. "Maybe I want to." For a moment, they just stood there, tangled up in each other, the rain hammering the world outside while something unspoken shifted between them. Then Ethan lifted her, effortless, like she weighed nothing, and carried her to the bed. He laid her down gently, his eyes never leaving hers as he hovered above her, his hands framing her face. The sheets were cool against her back, but his touch was fire, and when he kissed her again, it was like the whole damn city faded away. But as the thunder rolled again, Nia's mind drifted. She stared at the ceiling, her chest rising and falling. Ethan's arm draped over her waist as he caught his breath beside her. How the hell had she gotten here? A month ago, she'd been ready to run from this man. Ethan Carver, the billionaire who'd bought her like some prize at an auction. Now she was lying naked in his bed, her body still buzzing from his touch, wondering if maybe, just maybe, she'd misjudged him all along. It started 6 weeks back, in the sticky heat of a New Orleans summer. Nia Jackson was 22, a dancer with a fire in her soul that used to light up the streets of the French Quarter. Back in the day, you couldn't walk down Bourbon Street without hearing about her. Nia, the girl with the braids and the moves, spinning through jazz beats like she was born to it. Her crew used to tear up the pavement, bodies sinking to trumpets and drums, the crowd tossing dollar bills like confetti. She'd had dreams then, big ones, the kind that could take her out of this city and into the spotlight. That was before the crash. 2 years ago, her parents' car had flipped off the I-10 bridge, leaving her alone at 19, with nothing but a beat-up apartment and a hole in her chest. The dance crew scattered, the gigs dried up, and her Uncle Roy and Aunt Evelyn swooped in like vultures. They took her in, sure, but it wasn't out of love. Roy was a washed-up real estate hustler. Evelyn, a cold-eyed woman who cared more about her manicure than her niece. They treated Nia like a burden, a mouth to feed, always reminding her she owed them for every damn crumb. Nia hated it, their big house in the Garden District, all white columns and fake smiles, felt like a cage. She'd sit in her tiny room, brushing her braids and staring out at the oak trees dripping with Spanish moss, dreaming of the days when her feet used to fly. Roy and Evelyn didn't give a damn about her past. They only saw her beauty, those deep brown eyes, that radiant skin, the way she moved like water, and figured they could cash it in. Enter Ethan Carver. He was New Orleans royalty, the kind of guy whose name showed up in the Times-Picayune next to words like billionaire and ruthless. He'd built an empire out of nothing. Condos, hotels, half the damn skyline belonged to him. At 45, he was still a looker, tall, broad-shouldered, with a jawline that could cut glass and eyes that saw right through you. But there was a shadow to him, something heavy he carried behind that polished exterior. Nia first heard his name late one night, when Roy and Evelyn were whispering in the kitchen over glasses of bourbon. She'd crept downstairs, barefoot on the creaky hardwood, and caught the tail end of it. "She's our ticket, Evelyn," Roy had said, his voice low and greedy. "Carver's got the cash to fix everything. We just gotta sell her right." "Marry her off?" Evelyn snorted, swirling her drink. "She's a damn kid, Roy. She's 22, and she's got a face that'll make him sign anything. He's already said yes." Nia's stomach had dropped like a stone. She'd pressed herself against the wall, heart racing, as the pieces clicked together. They were trading her life, her body, for some deal with Ethan Carver. She'd wanted to scream, to smash every glass in that kitchen, but instead she'd run back upstairs, locked her door, and cried into her pillow until the sun came up. The next morning, Roy had laid it out plain as day. "You're marrying Ethan Carver," he'd said, leaning back in his chair at the dining table, his coffee steaming like nothing was wrong. "He's got money, Nia, and we need it. You're gonna save this family." "Save you mean?" She'd shot back, her voice shaking. "I ain't some pawn you can move around." "You're whatever we say you are," Evelyn snapped, her eyes hard as nails. "We've fed you, clothed you. Now it's time you paid us back." Nia had begged, pleaded, even tried calling Jasmine, her old dance crew buddy, to get her out. But Jasmine's phone was off, and Roy had her keys, her phone, her whole damn life locked down. 2 weeks later, she was standing in that cathedral, a bride in white, sold to a man she'd never even met. Back in the present, Nia turned her head, watching Ethan's chest rise and fall as he slept beside her. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, tapping the windows like a lazy jazz beat. She traced a finger along his arm, feeling the warmth of him, and wondered how she'd gone from hating him to this. Naked, vulnerable, and maybe even safe. It didn't make sense. Not yet. But something in the way he'd touched her tonight, the way he'd held back until she said yes, made her think there was more to Ethan Carver than the cold bastard she'd imagined. She pulled the sheet up over her chest, her mind spinning. Tomorrow, she'd have to face it all again. Roy, Evelyn, the lies, the life she didn't choose. But tonight, under these flickering lights, with Ethan's breath steady beside her, Nia let herself believe, just for a second, that maybe she could rewrite this story. "Hey, y'all," she imagined saying to some invisible crowd. "If you think this night's hot as a New Orleans summer, stick around. There's a whole lot of mess coming, and I ain't sure I'm ready for it. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Tell me if you think I should trust Ethan, or if I'm just fooling myself." The air inside St. Louis Cathedral hung heavy with the scent of lilies and old wood, the kind of smell that clings to your skin and makes you feel like you're drowning in history. Golden light streamed through the stained glass windows, painting the pews in reds and blues, while the organ hummed a slow, mournful tune that echoed off the high ceilings. Nia Jackson stood at the back of the aisle, her hands trembling around a bouquet of white roses, the petals soft against her fingers, but sharp with thorns she couldn't see. The wedding dress hugged her like a second skin, lace and satin, pure white, trailing behind her like a ghost she couldn't shake. She looked like a damn goddess, her brown skin glowing under the soft flicker of candlelight, her braids swept up into an elegant twist dotted with tiny pearls. But inside, she was a mess, her stomach twisting so hard she thought she might puke right there on the polished marble floor. The crowd turned to stare, hundreds of eyes, all decked out in suits and dresses that screamed money, whispering behind their hands like she was some kind of show pony. She caught snippets of it. So young. Carver's lucky. What a catch. It made her skin crawl. Up ahead, Ethan Carver stood at the altar, tall and steady in a black tuxedo that fit him like it had been sewn onto his body. His dark hair was slicked back, those piercing blue eyes locked on her, calm but unreadable. He didn't smile, didn't fidget, just watched her, like he was trying to figure her out. Nia's chest tightened. This wasn't a wedding. It was a transaction, and she was the goods. Her Uncle Roy stood beside her, his arm looped through hers like a shackle. He was all sharp angles and fake charm, his gray suit pressed crisp, his bald head gleaming under the lights. "Smile, girl," he muttered through gritted teeth, his breath sour with coffee and yesterday's bourbon. "You're embarrassing us." "Smile?" Nia hissed back, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "How the hell am I supposed to smile when y'all sold me like a damn car?" Roy's grip tightened, his fingers digging into her arm. "You watch your mouth. This is your job now. Look pretty and keep Carver happy. We're counting on you." Nia swallowed the lump in her throat, her eyes burning. She wanted to rip her arm free, to scream at him, at Evelyn sitting smug in the front row, at every single person in this damn church who thought this was okay. But her feet kept moving, one step after another, the click of her heels echoing like gunshots in her ears. Each step dragged her closer to Ethan, closer to a life she didn't want, and she could feel the weight of it pressing down on her chest, squeezing the air out of her lungs. She'd tried to run, of course. 2 nights ago, she'd slipped out of Roy and Evelyn's Garden District house, barefoot in the humid dark, her heart pounding as she dialed Jasmine's number on a burner phone she'd stashed under her mattress. Jasmine, her ride or die, the girl who danced with her under the French Quarter lights, hadn't picked up. Nia had left a voicemail, her voice shaking. "Jazz, it's me. They're marrying me off to some rich asshole. I need you to get me out. Please." But Roy had found her before she could even make it to the corner, dragging her back by the wrist, his face red with fury. "You think you're slick?" he'd snarled, tossing her phone into the trash. "Ain't no running from this, Nia." Now here she was, walking down the aisle like a lamb to slaughter. The organ swelled, the priest's voice droning through the vows, but it all blurred into static. She glanced at Roy, his cold eyes daring her to mess this up, then at Evelyn, her lips curled into a thin, satisfied smirk. Nia's hands shook harder, the roses slipping in her sweaty grip. She looked up at Ethan again, searching his face for something: cruelty, greed, anything to confirm he was the monster she'd built him up to be. But he just stood there, his expression soft, almost curious, like he wasn't sure what she'd do next. "Do you, Nia Jackson, take Ethan Carver to be your lawfully wedded husband?" The priest's voice cut through the haze, sharp and final. The church went dead silent. Nia's mouth went dry, her lips trembling as every eye bored into her. She could feel Roy's stare like a knife in her back, Evelyn's smugness radiating from the pews. Her mind screamed at her. Say no, run, fight. But her body wouldn't move. She thought of her parents, the way her dad used to spin her around to jazz records, the way her mom's laugh lit up their tiny shotgun house on Esplanade Avenue. They'd never have let this happen. But they were gone, and she was alone, trapped in a game she didn't know how to win. Her gaze flicked to Ethan. He hadn't moved, hadn't pushed, just watched her with those damn eyes, steady, patient, like he'd wait forever for her answer. Something in that look cracked her open, just a little. She didn't trust him, didn't want him, but maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the real enemy here. "I do," she whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them, her voice breaking like glass. A murmur rippled through the crowd, a mix of surprise and approval. Ethan's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but something close. He stepped forward, his hand warm as he slid a diamond ring onto her finger. Simple, elegant, heavier than it looked. The priest cleared his throat. "You may now kiss the bride." Nia froze, her breath catching as Ethan leaned in. She braced herself for something cold, possessive, but his lips brushed her cheek instead. Soft, fleeting, barely there. It left a strange warmth behind, like a promise he hadn't spoken out loud. The crowd clapped, but it sounded hollow in her ears, like applause for a play she hadn't auditioned for. He took her hand, guiding her back down the aisle, his touch light but firm. She didn't pull away, not because she wanted it, but because she didn't know what else to do. Outside, the muggy New Orleans air hit her like a slap, the sky bruising purple with dusk. A sleek black limo waited at the curb, its engine purring low. Ethan opened the door for her, his hand hovering near her back as she climbed in. She sank into the leather seat, her dress bunching around her thighs, and stared out the tinted window as the cathedral faded behind them. The ride was quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your skin. Ethan sat across from her, his long legs stretched out, his hands resting loose on his knees. He didn't talk, didn't push, just watched her, like he was waiting for her to break the ice. Nia's fingers twisted in her lap, her mind racing. She didn't know this man, didn't know what he wanted from her, but she'd just signed her life over to him. And for what? To save Roy and Evelyn's sinking ship? To keep a roof over her head? It didn't make sense. Not yet. "Where are we going?" she finally asked, her voice sharper than she meant it to be. "My place," he said, simple as that. His voice was deep, smooth, with a hint of a drawl that didn't quite fit the polished suit. "On Lake Pontchartrain. You'll like it." She snorted, crossing her arms. "Yeah? What makes you think you know what I like?" Ethan tilted his head, studying her. "I don't," he admitted, "but I figure a view of the water beats that stuffy house you've been stuck in." Nia blinked, caught off guard. He knew about Roy and Evelyn's place? How much did he know about her? She opened her mouth to snap back, but the words died on her tongue. Instead, she turned to the window, watching the city blur past. Neon signs flickering over jazz clubs, street vendors hawking pralines, the Mississippi River glinting in the distance. New Orleans was alive out there, pulsing with a rhythm she used to own. Now it felt like a stranger's town. The limo pulled up to a sprawling estate, all glass and stone, perched on the lake's edge like it was daring the water to take it. Ethan got out first, offering his hand. She ignored it, stepping onto the gravel drive herself, her heels wobbling as she straightened up. The air smelled of salt and magnolias, the kind of scent that sticks in your memory. He led her inside, marble floors, high ceilings, a chandelier dripping crystals like it was raining money. It was beautiful, sure, but it didn't feel like home. It felt like a stage. Ethan stopped at the foot of a grand staircase, turning to her. "It's late," he said, his voice soft but steady. "You should rest." Nia's throat tightened. Rest? In his house? In his bed? Her mind spun, panic clawing at her chest. I ain't ready," she stammered, stepping back. His eyes softened, just a flicker, but enough to stop her cold. "I get it," he said, nodding. "You don't have to be. Your room's upstairs, second door on the right. I'll be down the hall." She stared at him, waiting for the catch, but he just turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the empty foyer. Nia stood there, alone in the glow of that damn chandelier, her wedding dress heavy against her skin. She didn't trust him, not yet, but something about the way he'd left her space, the way he hadn't pushed, stuck with her. Maybe he wasn't what she thought, or maybe he was just better at hiding it. She climbed the stairs, each step a little slower than the last, and found the room he'd pointed out. It was huge. Cream walls, a king-sized bed piled with pillows, a window overlooking the lake where the moon danced on the water. She kicked off her heels, sank onto the edge of the bed, and let the tears come. Silent, hot, soaking into the silk of her gown. She was Nia Carver now, married to a man she didn't know, trapped in a life she didn't choose. But as she hugged her knees to her chest, the faintest spark flickered inside her, a tiny, stubborn piece that refused to break. The preservation hall was a hole-in-the-wall joint tucked off St. Peter Street, the kind of place where the air smelled like spilled bourbon and sweat, and the walls thrummed with the ghosts of 1,000 jazz riffs. Nia slipped through the creaky wooden door, the hem of her borrowed hoodie brushing her thighs, her braids tucked under a baseball cap she'd swiped from Roy's closet. It had been 3 days since the wedding, 3 days of pacing that lakefront mansion like a caged cat, 3 days of Ethan's quiet stares and careful distance. She couldn't take it anymore. She needed out, needed air, needed something real. And Jasmine had finally called back. The room was dim, lit by a handful of bare bulbs dangling from the ceiling, casting long shadows over the packed crowd. A trumpet wailed, sharp and soulful, cutting through the haze of cigarette smoke. Nia wove through the bodies, tourists in tacky Mardi Gras beads, locals swaying with beers in hand, until she spotted her. Jasmine leaned against the bar, all lean muscle and wild energy, her short curls bouncing as she tapped her foot to the beat. She wore ripped jeans and a tank top that showed off the tattoo snaking up her arm, a crescent moon inked in black. When she saw Nia, her face split into a grin, but her eyes stayed hard, scanning the room like she was ready for a fight. "Damn, girl," Jasmine said, pulling Nia into a quick, fierce hug. "You look like you've been through hell and back. What's this Carver dude done to you?" Nia forced a laugh, but it came out brittle. "Ain't what he's done. It's what Roy and Evelyn did. Sold me off like I'm some kind of prize hog." Jasmine's jaw tightened, her hand resting on Nia's shoulder. "I got your voicemail too late. Phone was dead, and I was crashing at my cousin's. But I'm here now. We can get you out of this mess." Nia shook her head, sliding onto a stool as the bartender slid a glass of sweet tea her way. She wrapped her fingers around it, the condensation cold against her skin. "It ain't that making that easy, Jazz. They got me locked down tight. No money, no phone. Roy's got eyes everywhere. The trumpet faded, replaced by a slow piano riff, the notes curling around them like smoke. Jasmine leaned closer, her voice low. You don't have to stay, Nia. I've been picking up gigs, street shows, club nights. I've got enough cash stashed to get us a bus out of here. We can start over somewhere they can't find you. Nia's chest ached, the old dream flickering to life. Her and Jasmine, free, dancing under open skies. But then she thought of Ethan, the way he'd looked at her in that cathedral, the way he'd backed off when she'd flinched. It's not that simple, she said, staring into her glass. If I run, Roy'll come after Ethan instead. They've got some kind of deal with him, money shit. I don't trust him, but I don't want to drag him down with me. Jasmine snorted, crossing her arms. You're worried about him? The guy who bought you? Nia, he's part of this. Don't let those blue eyes fool you. Before Nia could answer, the crowd parted, and there he was, Ethan, stepping into the club like he owned it, which, hell, he probably could have. He ditched the tux for a dark jacket and jeans, but that quiet power still clung to him, turning heads as he moved. His eyes found hers across the room, and for a second, everything stopped. The music, the chatter, the pounding in her chest. He didn't look mad, didn't look surprised, just curious, like he'd been waiting for her to bolt. Speak of the devil, Jasmine muttered, stepping in front of Nia like a shield. What's he doing here? Nia stood, her legs shaky but her chin up. Guess we're about to find out. Ethan closed the distance, his boots scuffing the worn floor. Up close, he smelled like rain and leather, a sharp contrast to the sticky sweetness of the club. He glanced at Jasmine, then back at Nia, his voice low and steady. Didn't know you danced like that, Nia. Saw you out there. Damn near stole the show. Her breath caught. He'd seen her. She'd slipped out to the street earlier, couldn't resist joining a busker's beat for a minute, just a quick spin, a taste of the old fire. She'd thought she was alone, lost in the rhythm, her body moving like water over stone. Now her cheeks burned, embarrassment mixing with something else. Pride, maybe, or defiance. Yeah, well, she said, crossing her arms. I don't exactly get to do it at your fancy house. Ethan's lips twitched, not quite a smile. Fair enough. Looked like you belonged out there. Jasmine cut in, her voice sharp. What do you want, Carver? She ain't your prisoner. You don't get to follow her around. He didn't flinch, just met her glare with that calm stare. I'm not here to drag her back. She can go wherever she wants. Just wanted to see what she's running from. Nia's stomach flipped. You know damn well what I'm running from. My uncle and aunt screwing me over. You're in on it, ain't you? Their little deal. Ethan's jaw tightened, a shadow crossing his face. I know they're in debt up to their necks. Owe me more than they can pay. But I didn't ask for you, Nia. They offered. Thought it'd square things. Square things? She stepped closer, her voice rising over the piano's mournful wail. You bought me like a damn car, Ethan. Don't stand there acting like you're some saint. I don't trust you, and I sure as hell don't want to be your fix for their mess. The crowd shifted, heads turning, but Nia didn't care. Her hands balled into fists, nails digging into her palms as the anger she'd bottled up came spilling out. Ethan didn't back down, didn't raise his voice, just stood there, taking it, his eyes locked on hers like he was seeing straight through her. I'm not saying you should trust me, he said finally, his tone even, almost too soft for the noise around them. I'm saying I didn't want it to go down like this. You're not a fix. You're a person. And I'm not here to own you. Then why'd you say yes? She shot back, her throat tight. Why'd you let them shove me at you? He hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor for the first time. Because I owed them once, long time ago, and because... He trailed off, then looked up, his eyes darker now, heavier. Because I saw you at that meeting, before the wedding. You were scared, yeah, but you didn't break. I figured maybe you'd get something out of this too. Nia laughed, sharp and bitter. What, a rich husband? A big house? That ain't me, Ethan. I don't give a damn about your money. I know, he said, stepping closer, his voice dropping low. But maybe you'd get a shot at something else. Freedom, eventually. A way out from under them. She stared at him, her breath hitching. Freedom. From Roy and Evelyn. It sounded too good, too clean, and she didn't buy it. Not yet. Jasmine grabbed her arm, tugging her back. Don't listen to him, Nia. He's spinning you a line. Let's go. But Nia couldn't move, her feet rooted to the floor. Ethan's words hung there, tangled up with the jazz notes, stirring something she didn't want to feel. Hope, maybe, or just plain confusion. She didn't trust him, not even close. But the way he'd watched her dance, the way he wasn't yelling or dragging her out, stuck in her head like a song she couldn't shake. I need to think, she said finally, pulling her arm free from Jasmine's grip. Alone. Jasmine's eyes narrowed. You sure? I ain't leaving you with him if... I'm sure, Nia cut in, her voice firm despite the shake in it. Go on, Jazz. I'll catch up. Jasmine hesitated, then nodded, throwing Ethan a look that could have cut glass. You hurt her, Carver, and I'll find you. She turned and melted into the crowd, leaving Nia alone with him under the dim lights. Ethan didn't push, just stood there, hands in his pockets. Take your time, he said. I'll be outside if you want to talk. He walked off, his broad shoulders cutting through the sea of bodies, and Nia sank back onto the stool, her head spinning. She didn't know what to believe. Roy and Evelyn's lies, Jasmine's warnings, or Ethan's quiet promises. The tea in her glass had gone warm, the ice melted into nothing, and she stared at it, her reflection blurry in the surface. She'd danced tonight, felt that old spark flare up, and Ethan had seen it. Seen her, not just the bride they'd dressed her up to be. But was he playing her? Or was he the crack in the wall she'd been waiting for? The piano picked up, a slow, aching tune that wrapped around her like a hug she didn't ask for. She ran a hand over her face, her fingers trembling. Hey, y'all, she muttered under her breath, imagining a camera rolling somewhere. This drama's heating up hotter than a gumbo pot. Ethan's out there talking freedom. Jazz wants me gone. What do you think? Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. I'm drowning here and I need your take. The rain came down in sheets, a relentless New Orleans downpour that turned the streets into rivers and the air into a thick, wet curtain. Nia stood at the edge of Ethan's sprawling living room, her bare feet sinking into the plush rug, her arms crossed tight over the thin cotton of her tank top. The floor-to-ceiling windows framed the storm outside, lightning slashing the sky, thunder rattling the glass like it was trying to break in. She'd been pacing this house for days, a ghost in her own skin, ever since that night at Preservation Hall. Ethan's words, freedom, a way out, kept looping in her head, clashing with Jasmine's warnings and the cold truth of Roy and Evelyn's betrayal. She didn't know what to believe, but she couldn't shake the itch under her skin, the need to do something. Ethan was in the study down the hall. She'd heard the faint clink of a glass, the rustle of papers. He'd kept his distance since the club, giving her space like he'd promised, but his presence was everywhere. The way the staff nodded when she passed, the extra blanket he'd left on her bed when the AC kicked too high, the quiet way he'd watch her over breakfast without saying a word. It was maddening. Part of her wanted to hate him, to see him as the jailer Roy and Evelyn had made him out to be. But another part, smaller and softer, kept whispering that maybe he wasn't. She glanced at the clock. past midnight. The house was still, the staff long gone, just her and Ethan and the storm. Her heart kicked up, a wild rhythm that matched the rain, and before she could talk herself out of it, she moved. Down the hall, past the framed art she didn't care about, to the study door cracked open just enough to spill a sliver of warm light onto the hardwood. She pushed it wider, her breath catching as Ethan looked up from his desk. He was a mess in the best way. Shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, dark hair tousled like he'd been running his hands through it, a half-empty glass of bourbon glinting amber in the lamplight. Papers were scattered across the desk, maps and contracts she didn't understand. But his eyes locked on her, sharp and steady, cutting through the haze. "Nia," he said, his voice rough with late-night gravel. "You okay?" She didn't answer, just stepped inside, letting the door click shut behind her. The air shifted, thick with the scent of leather and liquor and something electric she couldn't name. She stopped a few feet from him, her hands twisting at her sides, her tank top clinging to her skin from the humidity. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice low but firm, "about what you said at the club. Freedom. You mean that?" Ethan set the glass down, leaning back in his chair, his gaze never leaving hers. "Yeah, every word. Then why'd you marry me?" She took a step closer, her bare feet silent on the rug. "If you didn't want this, didn't want me, why'd you say yes to Roy and Evelyn?" He didn't flinch, but something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe, or regret. He stood, slow and deliberate, rounding the desk until he was close enough that she could feel the heat off him. "I told you. They owed me. Years back, Roy pulled me out of a deal that could have tanked me. I was young, stupid, in over my head. I paid him back with cash then. But they came calling again when their company started bleeding out. Said you were the fix." Nia's chest tightened, anger flaring hot. "So I'm just a debt to you? A damn IOU?" "No." His voice was sharp now, cutting through her like a blade. He stepped closer, his hands flexing like he wanted to reach for her, but didn't. "I didn't want you like that, Nia. I said yes because I thought, hell, I don't know. I thought maybe I could help you too. Get you out from under them. Give you a shot at something better." "Better?" She laughed, sharp and bitter, her hands balling into fists. "You think this is better? Living in your fancy cage, waiting for you to decide what I am?" Ethan's jaw clenched, his eyes darkening. "I don't want you in a cage. I want you to have a choice, something they never gave you. But I ain't perfect, Nia. I fucked up agreeing to this and I know it." She stared at him, her breath coming fast, the storm outside mirroring the one in her chest. He wasn't yelling, wasn't defending himself with slick lies, just standing there, raw and open, like he'd handed her a knife and dared her to use it. She wanted to hate him, to shove him away, but her feet wouldn't move. "Why should I believe you?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "You don't even know me." He took a step closer, close enough now that she could see the faint lines around his eyes, the weight he carried there. "I know more than you think," he said softly. "I know you dance like the world's yours when you think no one's watching. I know you're scared, but you don't let it own you. And I know you're stronger than Roy and Evelyn ever gave you credit for." Her throat tightened, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. "Stop it," she said, shaking her head. "Don't act like you care. You don't get to do that." "I do care," he shot back, his voice low and fierce. "More than I should. And it's killing me that you're here because of them, not because you want to be." Lightning flashed, bathing the room in white, and Nia's resolve cracked. She didn't know if it was the rain, the bourbon on his breath, or the way his voice broke just enough to make her believe him. But she moved her hands to his chest, shoving him back. "Then prove it," she said, her voice trembling. "Show me you're not them." Ethan didn't move, his chest rising and falling under her palms, his eyes burning into hers. Then, slow as the rain sliding down the windows, he lifted a hand, brushing a loose braid behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her skin. "I will," he whispered, "but only if you let me." Her breath hitched, her body buzzing like a live wire. She didn't pull away, didn't want to. Not this time. She stepped closer, her hands sliding up to his shoulders, her nails digging into the fabric of his shirt. "I'm not scared anymore," she said, echoing the words she'd carry from that night, her voice steady now. "So don't you dare hold back." Ethan's eyes darkened, a storm of his own brewing there. And then he kissed her. Slow at first, tentative, like he was giving her room to run. But Nia didn't run. She kissed him back, hard and hungry, her lips parting under his, her hands fisting in his hair. He groaned, a low, rough sound that sent heat pooling low in her belly, and pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her waist like he'd never let go. The rain pounded outside, a wild drum beat to match the one in her chest, and she melted into him, her body pressed tight to his, every inch of her alive with want. His hands slid under her tank top, warm and rough against her bare skin, tracing the curve of her spine until she shivered. She tugged at his shirt, fumbling with the buttons, and he helped her, yanking it off and tossing it aside. His chest was hard, dusted with dark hair, and she ran her hands over it, feeling the heat of him, the pulse under her fingers. He lifted her, easy as breathing, and set her on the desk, papers scattering to the floor as he stepped between her legs. She wrapped them around his waist, pulling him closer, her lips finding his again, hot, messy, desperate. "God damn, Nia," he murmured against her mouth, his hands sliding up her thighs, pushing the tank higher. "You're gonna kill me." "Good," she gasped, her head tipping back as his lips trailed down her neck, nipping at the sensitive skin there. "Maybe I want you gone," he chuckled, a low rumble that vibrated through her, and then he was kissing her again, deeper, his tongue tangling with hers until she couldn't think straight. The storm raged on, lightning flashing bright. But all she saw was him, Ethan, raw and real, giving her everything she'd demanded. Her tank top hit the floor, and his hands were everywhere, her hips, her ribs, cupping her breasts with a reverence that made her moan. She arched into him, her body singing, every touch unraveling the knots she'd carried for weeks. They didn't stop. Not until the rain slowed to a drizzle. Not until they were tangled on the rug, breathless and spent, her head resting on his chest as his fingers traced lazy circles on her back. She didn't say anything, just listened to the steady thump of his heart, the quiet after the storm settling over them like a blanket. She didn't trust him. Not fully, not yet. But this moment, felt like a crack in the wall, a glimpse of something she could hold on to. The morning sun crept through the blinds of Ethan's study, painting thin stripes of gold across the hardwood floor where Nia lay sprawled on the rug, her head still resting on his chest. The storm had passed, leaving a damp stillness in its wake, the kind that clung to New Orleans like a second skin after a big rain. Ethan's breathing was slow and steady beneath her, his arm draped over her waist, fingers splayed lazily against her bare hip. Her tank top and his shirt were crumpled somewhere near the desk, the scattered papers a silent witness to last night's chaos. She didn't move, didn't want to, just let the warmth of him seep into her, a quiet anchor in the mess of her thoughts. Last night had been a blur, anger, want, surrender, all crashing together like waves on the levee. She'd kissed him, touched him, let him see her in a way she hadn't planned, and now the aftermath sat heavy in her chest. She didn't regret it, not exactly, but it didn't mean she trusted him either. Ethan had cracked her open, sure, but the pieces didn't fit yet. Roy and Evelyn were still out there, pulling strings, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this, whatever this was, might just be another knot in their web. A soft knock on the door jolted her upright, her heart kicking into overdrive. Ethan stirred, blinking awake as Nia scrambled for her tank top, yanking it over her head just as the door creaked open. A woman stepped in, tall, sharp-edged, with red hair pulled into a messy bun and green eyes that cut like glass. She wore a leather jacket over a faded t-shirt, a notepad tucked under her arm, and the way she carried herself screamed trouble. Her gaze flicked from Nia to Ethan, one eyebrow arching as she took in the scene. "Morning, big brother," she said, her voice dry as a desert wind. "Looks like I'm interrupting." Ethan sat up, rubbing a hand over his face, his shirtless chest catching the light. "Lena," he muttered, half a groan. "What the hell are you doing here?" Nia's stomach dropped. "Brother?" She pulled her knees to her chest, suddenly feeling exposed despite the tank top clinging to her skin. "Who's this?" she asked, her voice sharp, eyes darting between them. "Nia Carver," the woman said, offering a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. She stepped closer, boots scuffing the floor. "Ethan's little sister, reporter for the Times-Picayune. And you're Nia, right? The bride everyone's whispering about?" Nia's jaw tightened, her fingers digging into her legs. "Yeah, that's me. What's it to you?" Lena tilted her head, studying her like she was a puzzle to crack. "Just curious. Heard about the wedding. Big splash, lots of cash changing hands. Figured I'd check in on my brother's new wife, see what's what." Ethan stood, grabbing his shirt from the floor and shrugging it on, his movements tense. "Lena, don't start. It's early, and I ain't in the mood." "Too bad," she shot back, crossing her arms. "You don't get to dodge me, Ethan. Not when I've got Roy and Evelyn Jackson sniffing around my desk, dropping hints about some old debt you owe them. Sound familiar?" Nia's blood ran cold. She pushed to her feet, her bare soles slapping the wood as she faced Lena. "What are you talking about? What debt?" Lena's eyes flicked to her, sharp and knowing. "Oh, you don't know? Your uncle and aunt have been real chatty lately, saying Ethan's got dirt they can use, something about a shady deal from way back, before he was Mr. Big Shot. They're threatening to spill unless he pays up." Ethan's face darkened, his hands balling into fists. "That's bullshit, Lena. They're bluffing, trying to squeeze me for more." "More?" Nia snapped, whirling on him. "What do you mean more? You said the wedding squared their debt. What else you been giving them?" He met her gaze, his jaw tight, but didn't answer right away. That silence hit her like a punch, and the fragile trust she'd started to build last night cracked wide open. "Ethan," she said, her voice low and trembling. "You tell me right now. What's going on?" He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "They came to me a few months back, before the wedding, said they'd tanked their company, owed half the city. I'd already paid off their old debt years ago, but they begged for a bailout. I said no until they brought you into it." "Brought me into it?" Her voice rose, sharp enough to cut. "You mean they pimped me out, and you just went along?" "No," he said, stepping closer, his hands out like he could calm her down. "I told you I didn't want it like that, but they said if I didn't take the deal, they'd drag me down with some old paperwork, shit I buried a long time ago. I figured marrying you was the lesser evil, Nia. Keep them quiet, give you a way out." Her chest heaved, anger and betrayal boiling over. "A way out? You call this a way out? I'm stuck here, Ethan, stuck with you, stuck with their lies, and now you're telling me there's more crap they're holding over your head." Before he could answer, the front door slammed open, echoing through the house like a gunshot. Nia spun toward the sound, her heart racing as heavy footsteps stomped closer. Jasmine burst into the study, her curls wild, her tank top soaked from the leftover drizzle outside. Her eyes blazed as they landed on Ethan, then softened when she saw Nia. "Nia, thank God," she panted, clutching a crumpled envelope in her hand. "I've been looking for you, ran all the way from the quarter. You gotta see this." "What is it?" Nia asked, stepping toward her, dread curling in her gut. Jasmine thrust the envelope at her, her voice shaking. "Found it in my cousin's mailbox. Someone dropped it off last night. It's from Roy and Evelyn. They're playing dirty, girl. Real dirty." Nia ripped it open, her fingers trembling as she pulled out a stack of papers, photocopies of old contracts, bank statements, a grainy photo of Ethan shaking hands with Roy outside some rundown building. Scrawled across the top in red ink, "Pay up, Carver, or this hits the press." She skimmed the pages, her breath hitching as the pieces clicked. Money funneled through shell companies, a deal gone sour, Ethan's name tied to it all. It wasn't enough to bury him, maybe, but enough to make waves, to smear his empire with mud. She looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "This true?" Ethan's face went hard, his eyes locked on the papers. "Yeah," he said finally, his voice flat. "It's old. 10 years back. I was desperate, made a bad call. Roy helped me cover it up, and I paid him for it. Thought it was done." "Done?" Nia laughed, sharp and hollow, tossing the papers at his feet. "It ain't done, Ethan. They're using it to choke you, and I'm the damn leash. You lied to me, said the wedding was the end of it. But you've been feeding them all along, haven't you?" "No," he said, his voice rising for the first time. "I cut them off. Told them the marriage was it. They're desperate, Nia, grasping at straws." Lena stepped forward, her notepad out now, pen poised. "Desperate or not, this could sink you, Ethan. If I run this—" "You won't," he snapped, turning on her. "You're my sister, Lena. Don't pull this shit." "I'm a reporter," she shot back unfazed, "and this is news. But I'll give you a heads up. Figure it out, or I'm not the only one who'll dig it up." Nia's head spun, the room closing in. Jasmine grabbed her arm, tugging her toward the door. "Come on, Nia. We're gone. This bastard's no better than Roy and Evelyn." But Nia yanked free, her eyes locked on Ethan. "You swore you weren't them," she said, her voice breaking. "Swore you'd prove it. Was last night part of the game, too? Get me soft so I'd stay quiet?" His face twisted, pain flashing there before he shut it down. "No," he said, low and fierce. "Last night was real, more real than anything I've had in years. I'm not playing you, Nia. I'm trying to fix this." "Fix it?" She stepped closer, tears burning her eyes. "You can't fix this, Ethan. I don't even know who to trust anymore. You, them, her." She jerked her head at Lena, then Jasmine. "I'm done." She turned, storming out of the study, Jasmine hot on her heels. Ethan called after her. "Nia, wait!" But she didn't stop, didn't look back. The marble foyer blurred past, her bare feet slapping the cold floor as she shoved the front door open and stepped into the muggy dawn. The air smelled of wet earth and gasoline, the lake glinting dull under a gray sky. Jasmine caught up, grabbing her hand. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice steady despite the chaos. "I don't know," Nia said, her chest heaving. "Anywhere but here." They ran, down the drive, past the iron gates, into the tangle of New Orleans streets, waking up slow. Her tank top stuck to her skin, her braids bouncing loose, and she didn't stop until her lungs burned and her legs gave out. She sank onto a curb in some quiet corner of the Marigny. Jasmine dropping beside her, both of them panting. The city hummed around them, cars rumbling, a distant trumpet wailing, but inside, Nia was a storm of her own, tearing itself apart. The sun hung low over the gulf, a fat orange ball sinking into the horizon, bleeding gold and pink across the waves. Nia stood barefoot on the sandy shore just outside New Orleans, the salty breeze tugging at her loose curls, her toes curling into the cool, wet earth. She'd ditched the braids a week ago, cut them free in a fit of something she couldn't name, letting her hair fall wild and natural around her shoulders. It felt right, like shedding a skin she'd outgrown. The beach stretched quiet and empty before her. A private strip Ethan had whisked her to after everything went down, a place where the city's noise couldn't reach. She hugged her arms around herself, the thin cotton of her sundress fluttering against her thighs, and let the rhythm of the tide wash over her, steady, relentless, a heartbeat she could lean into. It had been a month since she'd bolted from Ethan's mansion with Jasmine, a month of crashing on couches and dodging shadows, her mind a tangle of rage and doubt. She'd wanted to run, far and fast, out of New Orleans, out of this mess, but something kept pulling her back. Maybe it was the way Ethan's voice had cracked when he'd called her name, or the memory of his hands on her skin, steady and real in a way nothing else had been. She didn't trust him, not then, but she couldn't shake him either. Jasmine had stuck by her, fierce as ever, dragging her to gigs in the quarter, street corners where the brass bands played, where she could dance again, feel the old fire flicker back to life. They'd scraped by on tips and grit, Nia's body moving like it used to, her feet finding the beat like they'd never lost it. But even that couldn't drown out the questions. Ethan's secrets, Roy and Evelyn's threats, Lana's cold-edged warnings. It was too much, pressing in until she couldn't breathe. Then the news broke. Lena's article hit the stands like a bomb. Front page of the Times-Picayune, bold black letters screaming, "Carver Empire rocked by decade-old scandal." She'd laid it all out. Ethan's shaky deal from 10 years back, Roy's hand in covering it up, the money trails snaking through shell companies. But the real gut punch was the second half. Roy and Evelyn exposed. Their company a house of cards built on fraud. Their threats against Ethan just the latest in a string of blackmail schemes. Lena hadn't held back. Bank records, witness statements, even a grainy photo of Roy grinning outside a busted warehouse. They were done. Arrested 2 days later, hauled off in cuffs while the city buzzed with the fallout. Nia had read it on a borrowed phone, sitting on Jasmine's lumpy couch, her hands shaking as the pieces clicked. Ethan hadn't lied. Not about cutting them off. Not about the wedding being their last play. Roy and Evelyn had been the ones spinning the web, and she'd been the bait. She'd stared at the screen, her chest tight, until Jasmine nudged her. "You okay, girl?" "No," Nia had said, her voice raw. "But I think I owe someone an apology." She'd tracked him down, found him at his lakefront place, the same one she'd run from. He'd opened the door, looking like hell, dark circles under his eyes, shirt wrinkled, a glass of bourbon dangling from his hand. He didn't say anything, just stepped aside to let her in, and they'd stood there in the foyer, the silence stretching thin between them. "I saw the paper," she'd started, her voice shaky. "Lena's article, Roy and Evelyn, they're gone." "Yeah," he'd said, setting the glass down on a side table, his eyes locked on hers. "She didn't pull punches. Why didn't you tell me?" She'd stepped closer, her hands twisting together. "About the blackmail, the whole damn mess. Why'd you let me think you were part of it?" Ethan exhaled, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "I tried, Nia, back in the study, that night with Jasmine. But you were half out the door, and I didn't want to drag you deeper. Thought if I handled it quiet, you'd never have to know." "Handled it?" She'd laughed, sharp and brittle. "You let me hate you, Ethan. Let me think you were just another bastard using me." His face twisted, pain flashing there before he shut it down. "I didn't want you to hate me," he'd said, low and rough. "But I'd rather you hate me and walk away than stay stuck in their shit. I fucked up. Not telling you everything, agreeing to the wedding in the first place, I'm sorry." She'd stared at him, her throat tight, tears prickling her eyes. "You should have trusted me," she'd whispered. "I deserved that much." "You did," he'd said, stepping closer, his hands hovering like he wanted to touch her but didn't dare. "You still do. I ain't asking you to forgive me, Nia, just to hear me out." And she had. They'd talked. Hours bleeding into dawn, sprawled on that same rug where they'd tangled up before. He'd told her everything. The deal gone bad, Roy's leverage, the way he'd tried to bury it all until they dragged her into it. She'd told him about the dance cruise, her parents, the hole they'd left that Roy and Evelyn had filled with chains. It wasn't easy. Anger flared, tears fell, but it was real, raw, a thread pulling them back together. Now, here they were, on this beach, a reset she hadn't seen coming. Ethan stepped up beside her, his boots sinking into the sand, his hands stuffed in his pockets. He'd traded the suits for a faded Henley and jeans, his hair tousled by the wind, and damn if he didn't look good. Rougher, softer, more like a man than a mogul. "Pretty out here?" he said, his voice low, cutting through the crash of the waves. "Yeah," she murmured, glancing at him. "Quiet. I needed that." He nodded, his eyes on the water, the setting sun glinting off the blue. "Me too. Been a hell of a month." She laughed, a small, real sound that surprised her. Understatement of the year. They stood there, the space between them easy for once, no walls or lies crowding it. Nia took a breath, the salt stinging her lungs, and turned to him. "I found something. Back at Jasmine's place. A letter you wrote." His brow furrowed, confusion flickering across his face. "A letter?" "Yeah," she said, pulling a folded paper from her pocket, the edges worn from her hands. "It was in that envelope Jasmine brought, the one with Roy's dirt. Must have got mixed in. Addressed to someone named Claire." Ethan's face went still, his jaw tightening as he took it from her, unfolding it slow. His eyes scanned the lines, handwritten, messy, ink smudged in spots, and she saw the shift, the way his shoulders slumped just a fraction. "Where'd you get this?" he asked, his voice rough. "Like I said, Roy's stuff. Guess they dug it up to use against you. Who's Claire?" He didn't answer right away, just stared at the paper, his thumb brushing over the words. "She was someone I loved," he said finally, his voice barely above the waves. "Long time ago. Car accident took her. Same kind of crash that got your folks. I wrote this after. Swore I'd never let anyone in again." Nia's chest squeezed, the pieces snapping into place, his hesitation, the way he'd looked at her that first night, like he was seeing a ghost. "You broke that swear," she said softly, stepping closer. "Yeah," he said, folding the letter and tucking it away, his eyes meeting hers, raw and open. "Didn't mean to. Then you walked in, scared as hell but standing tall, and I couldn't look away." Her breath caught, the wind whipping her hair across her face. She reached up, brushing it back, her fingers trembling. "Why me, Ethan?" "Out of everyone. Why'd you let me in?" He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat off him, smell the faint cedar of his cologne. "Because you're real," he said, his voice low and steady. "Stronger than me, braver than you know. I saw you dance, Nia, saw you fight, and I knew I'd never be the same." Tears burned her eyes, but she didn't blink them away. She lifted a hand, resting it on his chest, feeling the steady thump beneath her palm.
"I thought you were the enemy," she whispered. "Thought you'd break me."
"Never," he said, his hand covering hers, warm and firm. "I'd burn it all down before I let that happen." She looked up at him, the sun dipping low, casting his face in shadow and light. Her heart stumbled, a wild, reckless beat, and she leaned in, her lips brushing his, soft at first, tentative, then deeper as he pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her like a shield. The kiss was salt and heat, a promise stitched into the crash of the waves, and when she pulled back, her forehead pressed to his, she felt it. Home, maybe, or something damn close. Months later, they did it again. Married, this time for real, under a canopy of oaks in City Park. Her in a simple dress. Him in a shirt that didn't quite button right. No crowd, no deals. Just them. Jasmine grinning from the sidelines, Lena snapping photos with a smirk. They had a boy now. Little Miles, with her eyes and his stubborn chin, born under a summer sky, a piece of them both. Nia opened a dance school in the 9th Ward, pouring Ethan's money into kids who moved like she used to, while he stepped back from the empire, trading boardrooms for mornings with Miles on his knee. Back on the beach, Ethan's hand found hers, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "Forever?" he asked, his voice soft as the tide. "Forever," she said, squeezing back, her smile bright against the dusk. The storm was over, hers, his, theirs, and the light breaking through felt like a song she'd dance to for the rest of her days. "Hey, y'all," she said to the wind, her voice carrying over the waves. "We made it, mess and all. You love this ending as much as I do? Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Tell me what you'd fight for, 'cause I found mine."